Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Nara and here we're discussing astrology, spirituality, and psychology. And this video is about moon's nodes such as south and north node. So I decided to make this video about lunar nodes because I realized that a lot of people are not aware of these placements and what they mean and how to work with them. So yeah, there's two lunar nodes, right? There's the north and south. So the north one is referred as Rahu, entails dragon's head. So dragon's head, right? One of the first parts of the body, right? And then the south node is referred as Ketu, which is the dragon's tail. So it's the very last part of the body, right? Moon placements in astrology, they represent the behavioral patterns, the past experiences, the conditioned mind, conditioned thinking, the habitual way of doing things. Whereas sun represents your future, right? The purpose, acting not out of habit, but creating a new and conscious way of being and doing things and whatever, creating your own reality kind of thing. That's your sun sign. And inadvertently, sun and moon have relationship in each and every one's birth charts. So some people do have aspects such as trine, square, oppositions, sextiles, conjunctions. So that's the lunar nodes. Every single person will have a relationship between sun and moon, and sun represents our father, right? It's a father figure. It's also the masculine side that we have, whereas the moon represents our mother. Okay, it also represents the dynamic of the relationship between our parents and what kind of dynamic we experienced when we were kids in between our parents, right? Between the genders, two different genders. We get conditioned, by our parental behavior in our childhood about the roles of mother and father and about the role of men and women in our lives, okay? If there was no harmony in relationships, then we internalize it, right? And then we expect that to happen in adult life. So I'm gonna get into this later, lunar nodes, because the moon is, cycling through the zodiac, the earth, and goes around the sun, and we get lunar nodes, right? It's the nodes of the moon. It's not the lunar node separate. It's not even a planet, okay? It just reflects the moon as it cycles through the zodiac. Moon, like I said, moon represents our emotional world, right? It represents our past experiences. So whenever we have experiences, right, they condition us to be a certain way, to expect certain things from other people, to expect certain situations to happen. Why? Because we experienced it for so many years or whatever, and it also represents your past life, okay? So lunar nodes, especially south node, represents your past life, is the baggage you were born with, okay? That's Ketu. So south node is Ketu. So it's the baggage you were born with. So it's all your past incarnations. It's the tendencies you have that you are just used to and that come naturally to you. You do not have to work for them. Like when you're born, it comes natural to you to be bold, for instance. Some people are more extroverted than introverted, right? It comes naturally to them. Why? Because they were born with this, okay? With this skill, with this talent, whatever you want to call it. Some people were born with Ketu, let's say that was introverted. So that means that in the past lives, that person was introverted. And in this lifetime, it comes naturally to that person to just not be very sociable with others, So it will, these are the tendencies of the south node. Like it's something that the area of your life, part of yourself, let me put it this way, that feels the most comfortable to you. So it can be sometimes where you're alone or when you're drinking or when you're watching something. So there's like some sort of comfort zone, and some safe spot inside of you where, like the feeling you have, the emotional state that makes you feel safe, that's the south node, okay? Because we've repeated it so many times, and it's a reaction at this point. And it's also the domain, the area of our life where we retreat when we're done or we're challenged by the, physical reality. So we try to like escape into that area of our lives and parts of ourselves, which is our south node as well, which is all our past experiences, the habitual way of doing things, being, thinking. So we retreat into that area when things get hard in our reality. And then we have the north node, right? So the north node is represents more I would say sun than the actual moon. So the south node is closer to the moon, whereas the north node is closer to the sun in meaning and purpose. And that's why I mentioned sun moon relationship in the beginning, because it's easier to understand the lunar nodes in this way. So the north node is basically the area of your life which is untapped. Okay, it's something that you aspire to be, you aspire to become. Let's say you might be having glimpses or like of imagination where you see yourself in the future being in a certain version of yourself, being in a certain career, having a certain look, having X amount of money, whatever that is. So that aspiration, like the vision you see yourself of the future, that's your north node, and actually sun sign as well, and house. So the sun and north node doesn't come naturally to us. We're not used to be doing the things of the north node because we haven't done them, because our south node is complete opposite. Because remember, the lunar nodes located, positioned in your birth chart in the opposite way. Like they're opposite to one another. They're not together, okay? So they represent the opposites and the conflicts, inner conflict. North node, the position of the north node, the house position, the sign, is basically the area of our lives that is untapped, which has not been realized, but only been felt on the inside. But acting from that area and from that zodiac sign is just unnatural to us, and do the things that we're supposed to do based on that position of the north node is just not natural to us. And when we try by, having visualization or whatever and aspiring to be that, because trust me, like the aspirations of the future come from the north node and your sun sign. And when we aspire to become that, and when we decide to act from that, okay, like let's say I want to be rich, and that's like one of my sun's purpose, sun position and north node purpose, because it's the second house, which is money, right? Which is material resources, skill set, which I have like 4 planets there. So I have a lot of skills. Let's say you have this vision, you want to do this, right? For instance, you want to become a millionaire, whatever the case might be, right? Or you have a vision of your appearance, of your physical body. Let's say you want to lose weight and you see yourself being X amount of weight. To take care of your body, eat better, go and like you need to picture and live from a version of yourself that already got that, right? Because we're all familiar with manifestations at this point, I feel. A lot of people are. But when you go and do it, it's not natural to you. And just because it's not natural to you, you give up, right? So this is the north node. This is the this is the sun position and the north node, because it's unnatural. And that's why I said working with your lunar nodes and your sun and moon is not for lazy people. Because once they feel like it's not natural to them, they will give up, They retreat back into their moon sign or their south node. And actually about the south node, I wanted to talk about the moon and the mythical story, right? Because we, in astrology, I by, through mythical story, because it's easier to understand the purpose of these planets and orbits this way, I feel. So Ishtar, right? It was moon. Ishtar was a female because moon is mother, right? Moon represents feminine energy. It's Cancerian energy. So Ishtar was basically a pushover. And she also was only doing things that she was feeling like doing. Like she never intended to go out of her way and do something different. She only did the habitual things. Like she never changed anything. Like she reacted to things emotionally the same way, mentally the same way, based on the conditioned, past experiences. When she felt pain, she would give herself to pain. When she felt like, having sex, she would give herself to everybody. Like Moon is actually known as a prostitute. Like Ishtar is known as a prostitute in astrology, in mythical story. And that's why I always like emphasize, right, to people to go against their moon signs. Like, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of wisdom from the moon signs, but just being aware of the tendency that you are being drawn back into that sign, which actually prevents you from going where you want to go, is very important. And not enough people talk about how moon sign holds people back. And that's just, yeah. So that's why I really want to talk about this and make people aware. Sign, right? Moon sign and south node is closer to moon placement that you have, whereas the north node is closer to sun placement that you have, right? So the north node represents future purpose, who you were supposed to become in this incarnation, right? Which is the same as your sun sign. And we don't realize our sun sign until we're old enough, until we passed all the tests of our rising sign, right? And after the test, negative experiences, hurtful and painful feelings, consequences from the rising sign path, we discover our sun sign, right? So trial and error, and moon sign as well. But the south node and the moon pass, it's Ishtar, right? And Ishtar represents the south node, which she used to retreat back into her pleasures, into how she was feeling. She would give herself away to people if she felt like, if she felt like a little promiscuous. She would, cry and suffer psychologically, mentally, emotionally if she felt like suffering, because it's a conditioned past, right? Away. Like she did not even consciously try to stop her suffering or to stop her habitual way of being. She did not. So there was no sun involvement, right? So, but we do have all of these placements. So we should consciously choose where we go. And also when we go there, we need to be aware that it's kind of unnatural to us. Therefore, we shouldn't, with this awareness, it should become easier for us to stay persistent. Like, it's not supposed to be natural to you. You are supposed to make it natural to you through repetition. Okay, so it's just my thoughts on subconscious mind work, because I've done a lot of shadow work with the application of astrology. That's why I'm very excited about this topic. North node is so the south node is where we constantly retreat. It's easier because Ishtar, right? And then we have the north node. So the north node is the position of, it's the area of our life and also the part of ourselves that wants to get in higher, but then she's afraid to try things. She's afraid of unpredictability. She's afraid of going against her path. She's afraid of, changing herself, transforming herself to a point where others won't recognize her. Like, she'd rather keep the image going, of the south node because others are used to it, rather than transforming herself in order to benefit her own life so that she can go where she needs to be. She goes and, stays in the same freaking spot, even if it doesn't work for her, in the same version of her, so that other people are still around her, because she's afraid to try new things, unpredictability. The axis represents the areas of your life where you feel that conflict, the inner tension, the inner, confusion about which way to go. So the areas of our lives are represented by the house position of those nodes. Hey, I love the analogy One book I read on the houses, there was an analogy of brain. So there's a part of our brain which stands for the habitual behaviors that we have, thoughts, and habitual way of doing things. And also that part of ourselves, right? That part of ourselves is responsible for our lung, our heart, our breathing, you know, like basic functioning of our organism. And then there's the cerebral cortex, which is not responsible for our survival, such as breathing, you know, our heart beating, my arm, you know, I'm able to lift my arm up. So it's not cerebral cortex, it's, oh, I hit 10K steps. So cerebral cortex is not responsible for our organism, but what it's responsible for, it's responsible for our conscious mind, for us to be intentional, for us to imagine psychological foundations that we have, psychological beliefs that we have. It's all our cerebral cortex. So I like to refer to cerebral cortex as our north node or our sun sign. So see, we are conscious of being conscious. It's from cerebral cortex. Cerebral cortex is responsible for our imagination, for us consciously deciding what situation we want to create, manifestations. It's all cerebral cortex. But the other part of our brain is what is responsible just for survival. You can live without a cerebral cortex as well, but you won't be able to think or do anything. Now I want to talk about lunar nodes through the houses. If you're someone who has the north node in the first house and south node in the seventh house, that means that in this incarnation, in this lifetime, you need to learn how to live for yourself instead of for other people. Okay, so you need to stop trying to please others, you know, and constantly adjusting your behavior and changing your approach, changing your own principles of life, you know, just in order to be liked by other people. But rather, your north node position in the first house indicates that you need to live for yourself. You need to be more focused on yourself. What do you want? Stop pleasing others, because the south node is your past life, right? Is what you've done so many times. And in the seventh house, that means that pleasing others, like pleasing romantic partners, just like, you know, friends in general, just society, you know, and you got to stop doing that. Then people who have the opposite position of the lunar nodes, but in the same houses, if you are someone who has the south node in the first house and then the north node in the seventh house, that means that you are so used to be by yourself, focus on yourself, fulfilling your own desires and wishes, and not cooperating with other people at all. So the danger for you is to stop being too much in your own head and doing your own thing, but rather form some connections with other people. Try to find compromise. Don't only, you know, live for yourself and do your own thing and forget about society and other people completely. Because south node in the first house means that you're just so used to be full of yourself, you know, and not agree with others, that like there's no cooperation whatsoever. So for these people, you got to learn how to cooperate. Otherwise, you'll be lonely. Yeah. If you have the north node in the second house and the south node in the eighth house, node in the second house represents financial independence. Okay. This is an untapped area of your life. Okay, so this is something you need to develop as, you know, an individual. You got to become independent, develop self-worth that are not dependent on material things or physical things, but rather develop your spirituality very well, because the tendency with this placement is to go to your south node, which is in the eighth house, which is other people's money, credit. Okay, so that means that danger with this placement not to get into a lot of debt, which is my biggest thing too. You know, like I'm aware of this because I have the tendency. I mean, I had at certain times. Okay, so I got to be aware of that. and also not to over rely on other people, but develop develop some sort of independence, okay, from others. What if you have the South Node in the second? And also, let me actually put it this way, the second 8th house axis is the worst to have, because I have it. It's not only because I have it, it's because this axis, right, is the least understood by a person. Because when you just get intuitive feelings, but you're not really sure what it is, because that's the conflict you have. It's not like outward conflict in your mind, it's like feelings weird and you don't know what it means, you know. So the second 8th house axis is pretty hard to understand, because remember, it's a Pluto's house too, the 8th house. It's a psychic death and rebirth. Okay, what if you have South Node in the 2nd house and the North Node in the 8th house? That means that you are just so used to be financially independent and just taking care of yourself to a point where you may not even be able to ask for help from other people. So that's the danger with this placement. And also trusting others. You got to learn how to trust others, because the South Node in the 2nd house puts too much, it's a Taurus energy, too much Taurus here. I don't have enough, let's say, of the 2nd house, but South Node in the 2nd means too much of the financial independence, okay, to a point where I don't need others, I don't trust others, whatever, you know. So that's the danger with this placement. And also, these people may not even ask for help when they're really desperate, when they really need help. So what if you're someone who has the North Node in the 3rd house and South Node in the 9th house? So North Node in the 3rd house is a lot of Gemini energy, right? But it's actually not enough for you. It's not natural for you to have Gemini energy, which is thinking, you know, learning skills and being intellectual, whatever, but applying them in your everyday life. Okay, that's Gemini energy. But the tendency for this placement, right, for these people, they go into their South Node of the 9th house of Jupiter and Sagittarian energy, right? They think big. They always think that they need to go over, you know, in some perspective. You know, they need to uncode the secrets of the universe in order to live their life happily. And, you know, like they always think that there's a higher and bigger perspective to be reached. Until they reach it, they can't really focus on everyday life kind of thing. Caution, right? So the purpose of the North Node is to learn how to be practical in your 3rd house, how to use whatever you know in your everyday life, you know, because what they do, right, they don't like what they see in their everyday life, and they go into higher perspective because they think that that's what's going to save them. No. And I actually met a person with this placement where it was so profound to a point where no, there is a high perspective needs to be reached. No, what you say is not good. I gotta go there. Well, you go there, but it's been years now. It's been how many years? You're still not there, you know? So yeah, so be aware of that. So focus on everyday things, you know, the knowledge of everyday life, on practical things, what's in front of you. That's what they need to focus on instead of going there, because they completely reject the area of their life, which is the 3rd house things, running errands, getting things done. They go into the big one. No, come back here. You already been there. Okay. Okay, what if you're someone who has South Node in the 3rd house and a North Node in the 9th house? So that would mean the opposite, right? So you're someone who is used to just, you know, being rational and learning a little bit of here so that I can use it practically, you know, in my life, but not really reaching for spiritual awareness. Okay, so these people might be drawn to that area of their life where everything seems familiar, you know, where, you know, they don't learn much. They just like practical learning, pretty much. Like they're not interested in changing their perspectives, in seeing, like, you know, like the South Node in the 9th house would think, right, oh, I need to reach that perspective. ninth house is just like untapped area for y'all, and you just like, there's no intuition in thinking. There's like too much logic, which is Gemini, right? Logic and rationality. So stop doing that, okay? Like you gotta balance. You gotta introduce balance. Maybe, you know, start reading some spiritual books. Meditate so that you can heighten your awareness and intuition. If you're someone who has the North Node in the 4th house and the South Node in the 10th house. Actually, I had a very close friend who has this placement, and gosh, I seen it work in real time. Okay, so these people might be overly drawn to their career, to becoming some type of figure, you know, to becoming famous for the work they do, for their ideas and whatever. However, they have to. That's what they're used to, okay? They go into the 10th house and they sacrifice everything, their identity, their friends, their loved ones for that, okay? But these people instead have to work on themselves, do the inner work, understand their psychology. And instead of, you know, becoming somebody and becoming famous, they got to learn how to form a home environment and have their loved ones around them, because they tend to lose them because they go there. And that's somewhere they're not supposed to go because they already done it in the past life. Okay. So they really need to work on themselves, and they have to develop psychological awareness and understand themselves psychologically. We all do, but with this placement especially, because that's where that wholeness and completeness comes from to a person. And they are did the shadow work, understood their psychology, but what they tend to do, reject everything and go up. Reject environment, go up. When they go up, they don't get what the fulfillment that they hoped they would get, unfortunately. If you have South Node in the 4th house and North Node in the 10th house, that would mean that instead of hiding from the environment and new experiences, you actually need to challenge yourself and go there. Okay, because the tendency with this placement is to go into your 4th house, like be with your family, like maybe these people are actually, they can't even like separate from their family for too long. They're very connected to their family, to a point where it's like their habitual way of being, and they don't challenge themselves going like rejecting families, like let's say ancestral trauma. They just leech on to ancestral trauma and karma. Okay, and that's like the danger with this. Like you got to go against it and develop your own identity, and career for which you'll be known. And for this, you'll have to overcome ancestral trauma and the beliefs from family that you acquired. Okay, because you won't be able to go up there and make a career out of your talents if you leech on to that. Okay, so in order to become successful, and that's what you're supposed to become, instead of the other placement, right? So the other placement, no, they have to develop a home and family in this lifetime. North Node in the 4th, they have to develop the family environment, nurture their loved ones, learn to how to do that because they're not aware of it and they're not good at it. Okay, and that's their purpose. But the South Node in the 4th people are just so used to family environment, they're actually like attached to it to a point where it just halts their progress as their own individual. They're nobody usually without their family, so that's the danger. If you're someone who has North Node in the 5th house and South Node in the 11th house, that means that you need to develop your self-expression and creativity. You need to develop your hobbies, like something that reflects your inner world, where you can imprint, your emotional world, your creativity, because, and also follow your own voice, because through hobbies, because 5th house is Leo's house. I'm a Leo. It's all about creativity and doing what you like, right? It's the 5th house. And having North Node in the 5th, it means that it's unnatural to you to follow your own voice. And instead, you having South Node in the 11th house, which is Aquarian house, which is groups, society, right? Political parties. You might be like very influenced by groups and other people. And, you know, the main lesson for this placement is to learn how to rely on yourself and be your own creative person, not be swayed by other people and, you know, molding yourself or readjusting yourself, similar to first 7th house, because it's also fire house and then the air house, right? Fire, air always goes this way. Okay, fire is all about me, you know, and air is all about them. Okay, so when it's air house, it's like people are influencing me. When it's fire house, it's I'm influenced, like I'm not influenced by anybody. I rather create influence. Okay, so that's fire houses and fire signs. Then if you have South Node in the 5th house and North Node in the 11th house, you might be too full of yourself too, you know, similar to the 1st and 7th house axis, to a point where like you love your creative abilities and hobbies and too attached to them and like your own rhythm, okay? In work, in what you do, in your life. You're not even aware of groups, like you're not even involved with 11th house things like political parties, organizations. Like you're not a part of those things, but you should become a part of those things. You should contribute to society. So South Node in the 5th represents, and North Node in the 11th represents, you have to contribute to society. You need to at least follow other people in some way, not fully, but in some way, because these people tend to reject others and just do their own thing. Fire signs, that's what they are. I'm a fire sign. If you are someone who has North Node in the 6th house and South Node in the 12th house, you need to learn how to become practical and stop daydreaming too much, because 12th house is Piscean house, okay? It's Neptune, it's dreams, it's imagination. So these people literally just exist, just have a mundane existence, and they don't like practical things, you know, of Virgos. 6th house things, I'm not interested, because you have North Node in the 6th, right? It's not natural to you. So that's why you go escape into the 12th house. Gotta learn how to do things too. You know, practical matters, being organized, like Virgo's energy is very much needed here for a proper balance for your life. But if you're someone who has South Node in the 6th house and North Node in the 12th house, then you are overly practical, okay? To a point where you don't even have that imaginative Piscean energy at all. Like you're not someone who imagines things, who dreams or whatever, like intuition. You don't pay attention to that. You pay attention more so to your practical things. Very rational, but also very judgmental. Like having South Node in the 6th house, it's a lot of criticism. It's a lot of Virgo's energy. It's like the bad sides of Virgo, I would say. They need to develop understanding for others, because they can be overly judgmental and critical, because they expect others to be as perfect as they are and as practical as they are, and they, you know, others can't be like them all the time. So that's why they need to develop understanding for others, and also like that spirituality, right? That spiritual side where unconditional love, which is 12th house things. So yeah, hope you guys liked this video. Hope you made it this far. If you did, thank you very much. I really appreciate y'all. Hope you guys liked this video. If you did, please hit the like button, and I will see you in my next video. Bye y'all.